The celebration is for core team members only. Those words hit me like ice water as I stood outside the executive conference room, watching my colleagues pop champagne bottles through the glass doors. I clutched my tablet containing the forensic accounting analysis that had just saved the firm from a $50 million lawsuit. "Excuse me," I said quietly to Miranda Blackwood, the managing partner who had delivered this crushing blow. Inside the room, every person from our litigation support team was raising glasses of Dom Perignon. Even Jake was there, the paralegal who'd been with us for exactly 3 weeks and spent most of that time playing mobile games. "We simply don't have space for everyone," Miranda said with a kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "You understand, don't you, Riley? This is really more of an attorney celebration." I looked through the glass at the spacious conference room that easily held 40 people. The same room where I'd presented my findings just 6 hours earlier, the forensic analysis that had uncovered the accounting discrepancies proving our client's innocence. The analysis that had taken me 4 months of nights and weekends to complete. "Why would we need a forensic accountant at a legal victory party?" added Preston Vale, the senior partner who'd been taking credit for my discoveries all week. "Numbers people don't really celebrate the same way we do." That moment crystallized 3 years of accumulated slights. Every time my analysis had been presented without my name attached. Every time I'd been excluded from client meetings where my findings were discussed. Every promotion that went to lawyers while the support staff who made their victories possible remained invisible. "I see," I said calmly, opening my tablet. "Check your email in about 5 minutes." As I walked away from their celebration, I could hear the laughter and congratulations behind the glass. Before I tell you what happened next, understand this. I'm a forensic accountant who specializes in corporate fraud and asset recovery. My job is finding what people try to hide. And after 3 years at Blackwood, Vale and Associates, I have found plenty. Stay with me, because what that email contained wasn't just my resignation. It was 3 years of documented evidence that would transform me from the excluded outsider into the person who owned their careers. My name is Riley Martinez. Until that day, I was the senior forensic accountant at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. I have a photographic memory for numbers and an obsession with patterns that makes me exceptional at uncovering financial deceptions. These skills made me invaluable to the firm, but apparently not valuable enough to include in their celebrations. I'm the type of person who arrives early, stays late, and believes that solving problems matters more than who gets the applause. I was naive enough to think that excellent work would eventually be recognized. I was wrong. I grew up as the daughter of immigrants. My father was an engineering professor. My mother ran a small accounting practice. They taught me that in America, hard work and competence would always be rewarded. They meant well, but corporate America had different rules than they understood. After earning my CPA and getting a master's degree in forensic accounting, I thought I'd found the perfect position at Blackwood, Vale and Associates. They promised intellectual challenges, high-profile cases, and advancement opportunities for exceptional performers. My first year exceeded every expectation. I developed a revolutionary new method for tracing hidden assets through cryptocurrency exchanges. I discovered a pattern of expense report fraud that recovered $2.3 million for a major client. I even identified the smoking gun in a complex securities fraud case that everyone thought was unwinnable. Each time, I followed protocol precisely, documenting my methods and presenting findings through proper channels. I believe my work spoke for itself. The firm's quarterly newsletter featured my innovations prominently. Client satisfaction surveys specifically mentioned the quality of forensic analysis. I received a performance bonus and glowing reviews from supervising attorneys. Miranda Blackwood herself told me, during my annual review, that I was exactly the kind of analytical mind that would help the firm reach the next level. The problems began when the firm merged with Hartford and Associates, bringing in Preston Vale as a new senior partner. Preston came with a reputation for winning impossible cases and had brought several high-value clients with him. What I didn't know initially was that Preston's success came from taking credit for his support team's innovations while ensuring they remained invisible to clients and colleagues. The first incident happened during the Meridian Corporation embezzlement case. I'd spent weeks developing a forensic timeline that revealed how the CFO had been systematically moving money through shell companies. My analysis was airtight, every transaction traced, every discrepancy documented. I presented my findings to Preston in a private meeting, walking him through each element of the scheme. 2 weeks later, I watched from the back of the courtroom as Preston presented his theory of the case to a packed gallery of reporters and potential clients. "Brilliant deduction on the shell company network," I said afterward, assuming he'd simply forgotten to mention my contribution. Preston looked at me with genuine confusion. The overall strategy was mine. You just ran some numbers to support it. I was speechless. The entire forensic framework, every connection, every pattern, every piece of evidence had come from my analysis. But as a non-attorney support staff member trying to build my reputation, I swallowed my frustration and said nothing. Over the following months, the pattern repeated itself. I would identify crucial evidence, develop breakthrough analytical approaches, or discover hidden assets, only to watch Preston present these discoveries as his own insights to clients, media, and the legal community. When I finally gathered the courage to speak with Miranda about the situation, her response chilled me to the bone. "Do you have documentation proving these discoveries were exclusively yours?" she asked, not looking up from her computer screen. "I have all the original analysis files, timestamped work products, and email chains showing my methodology development," I replied. "But you developed these during work hours, using firm resources, as part of cases assigned to Preston's team?" "Well, yes, but the analytical frameworks and investigative approaches were completely original. Then they belonged to the firm, Riley. Preston is the senior partner on these cases. When he presents case theories to clients, that's simply how law firms operate. I left her office understanding that my contributions would always be absorbed into someone else's success story. I might have continued in this frustrating but tolerable situation if not for what happened 8 months ago. While analyzing suspicious transactions for the Westfield Industries case, I noticed an unusual pattern in their international wire transfers that suggested cryptocurrency money laundering. Over the next several weeks, working primarily on weekends and evenings, I developed a groundbreaking methodology for tracing cryptocurrency transactions across multiple exchanges and wallet addresses. The technique involved analyzing transaction timing patterns, correlating wallet behaviors, and identifying unique digital fingerprints that remained consistent even when funds moved through privacy coins. The breakthrough was revolutionary. Not only did it prove our client's innocence in the Westfield case, but it established a new forensic standard that could be applied across hundreds of similar cases. I prepared a detailed presentation for the monthly partners meeting, practicing late into the night before the scheduled session. But when I arrived at the conference room, Preston intercepted me at the door. "The agenda is packed today, Riley. We need to keep presentations focused on billable hour generators," he said smoothly. "Why don't you send me your materials? I'll incorporate the key points into my case update." Reluctantly, I handed over my presentation folder containing months of work. I sat through the 3-hour meeting waiting for my moment, only to watch Preston deliver a rushed 5-minute summary that completely missed the innovative methodology I developed. The partners nodded politely and moved on to the next agenda item. My revolutionary approach was filed away for future consideration. 3 weeks later, the firm hired Diana Kim as a lateral partner from a competing firm. She was Harvard Law Review, came with high-profile clients, and was immediately positioned as the firm's new financial crime specialist. 1 month after that, Diana presented her new cryptocurrency tracing methodology to a packed auditorium at the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers conference. It was my system, with minor modifications and a new name, the Kim Protocol. The legal community was astounded. The methodology was immediately adopted by law enforcement agencies and corporate investigations firms nationwide. Diana was profiled in American Lawyer magazine as an innovator who was revolutionizing financial crime detection. Meanwhile, my salary remained unchanged, and my request to attend the conference where my work was being presented was denied due to budget constraints. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by case files representing 3 years of innovations that had generated millions in revenue for the firm. While my career remained stagnant and my contributions invisible, something fundamental shifted in my perspective. If results were all that mattered, I would show them exactly what those results cost when they came from someone who wasn't valued. I began working on a project I never mentioned at the office, a comprehensive audit of every case I'd worked on, documenting not just my contributions but the full financial impact of my analyses. I tracked recovered assets, avoided liabilities, successful case outcomes, and new client acquisitions that could be directly attributed to my work. The numbers were staggering. Over 3 years, my forensic analyses had generated more than $47 million in value for the firm through asset recovery, successful case resolutions, and new business development. But documentation was only the beginning. I started scheduling coffee meetings with former colleagues who had left the firm under similar circumstances, building a network and gathering intelligence about patterns I had been too focused on my work to notice. Marcus Thompson, who'd left after his innovative contract analysis system was claimed by a senior associate, introduced me to the concept of systematic contribution appropriation. Elena Rodriguez, whose client development strategies had been absorbed into a partner's practice-building methodology, shared documentation techniques I hadn't considered. Each conversation revealed that my experience wasn't isolated. The firm had a consistent pattern of extracting maximum value from support professionals while ensuring advancement opportunities remained limited to attorneys. More importantly, these conversations connected me with talented professionals who had maintained their integrity despite being undervalued. People who, like me, continued innovating because excellence was part of their fundamental character, not because they received recognition for it. 6 months before the victory celebration, I began conducting my own forensic investigation into Blackwood, Vail and Associates, using the same techniques I'd employed on behalf of their clients. What I discovered was fascinating. The firm's recent growth and profitability weren't primarily due to exceptional legal work or partner business development. They were directly correlated with the systematic appropriation and monetization of support staff innovations. Preston's brilliant case strategies consistently coincided with major analytical breakthroughs from forensic staff. Diana's revolutionary methodologies aligned perfectly with timing of new hires in financial analysis roles. The firm's competitive advantages in complex litigation weren't coming from attorney expertise. They were coming from unrecognized support professionals whose work was being rebranded and resold. I documented everything meticulously. Email chains showing idea theft, financial records proving revenue attribution, performance reviews demonstrating the disconnect between contribution and recognition, client testimonials praising attorney innovations that were actually support staff breakthroughs. But documentation alone wasn't enough. I needed leverage. That's when I discovered something unexpected while analyzing the firm's expense reports for patterns, a skill that had become second nature after years of fraud investigation. Preston Vail's expense account contained irregularities that suggested systematic embezzlement, restaurant charges that didn't correspond to client meetings, hotel stays that coincided with personal travel, client development, expenses that correlated with his wife's business travel schedule. Over 18 months, the pattern revealed approximately $340,000 in fraudulent reimbursements. For a forensic accountant, it was like finding a smoking gun in a murder case. I spent the following months carefully documenting Preston's expense fraud while simultaneously building my case for contribution appropriation. Every fraudulent charge was cross-referenced with calendar entries, client records, and supporting documentation that proved personal use of firm funds. Meanwhile, I reached out discreetly to contacts at competing firms, testing the market for someone with my specific expertise and track record. The response was overwhelming. 3 major firms expressed immediate interest in hiring me as a senior manager. 2 boutique forensic accounting practices offered partnership tracks. Most intriguingly, Harrison and Associates, the city's fastest-growing white-collar defense firm, offered me something unprecedented, the opportunity to build and lead my own forensic accounting division with full credit for innovations and methodologies I developed. "We've been watching your work for years," said Margaret Harrison during our confidential meeting. "Everyone in the legal community knows the analytical breakthroughs are coming from Blackwood's forensic team, not their attorneys. We want to give you the platform and recognition your innovations deserve." The offer included a 40% salary increase, equity participation, and most importantly, my name on every methodology I developed. No more watching other people present my work. No more being excluded from the celebrations of victories I'd made possible. I prepared my resignation letter, but decided to wait for the perfect moment. That moment came sooner than expected. The Westfield Industries case concluded exactly as my cryptocurrency analysis had predicted. Our client was completely exonerated when the blockchain evidence I developed proved the embezzled funds had been moved by the CFO, not our client. The case generated massive media attention, positioned the firm for dozens of similar high-value engagements, and established what the legal press was calling a new standard in financial crime defense. Preston and Diana were featured on the cover of Legal Times magazine as the dynamic duo revolutionizing white-collar defense. The article praised their innovative approach to cryptocurrency forensics and breakthrough analytical methodologies that had transformed impossible cases into landmark victories. My name appeared nowhere in the coverage, despite the fact that every innovative approach and breakthrough methodology had originated from my analysis. The firm announced they were throwing a victory celebration for the core legal team that had made the Westfield success possible. Partners, associates, paralegals, and even recent interns received invitations to what was being called the biggest celebration in firm history. I learned about the party the same way I learned about most firm social events, by watching other people discuss it around me. On the day of the victory celebration, I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, not because I expected to be included, but because I wanted to look professional for what I knew would be my final day at Blackwood, Vail and Associates. I arrived early as always and spent the morning finalizing my documentation. 3 years of contribution theft, 18 months of expense fraud, financial projections showing the revenue impact of losing my innovations, and comprehensive evidence of systematic discrimination against support staff. By late afternoon, the executive conference room was being transformed into a party venue. Catering staff arranged champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Partners practiced victory speeches. Associates clustered in excited groups discussing the firm's bright future. I stood outside the conference room, watching through the glass as my colleagues celebrated work that I had made possible, waiting for someone to remember that I had played a role in their success. That's when Miranda approached me with words that crystallized 3 years of frustration into perfect clarity. "The celebration is for core team members only." As I stood there absorbing the casual cruelty of being excluded from celebrating my own work, while watching Jake, who contributed nothing but had the right job title, raise a champagne glass, I felt something shift inside me. For 3 years, I had accepted being invisible. I had tolerated watching others receive credit for my innovations. I had convinced myself that excellence would eventually be recognized by people who were determined never to see it. But exclusion from their victory celebration wasn't just another slight. It was the perfect demonstration of exactly how little they valued the person who had made their victory possible. I pulled out my tablet, composed a brief email, and attached 4 documents that would change everything. My resignation letter, my job acceptance with Harrison and Associates, the comprehensive expense fraud report on Preston Vale, and a detailed analysis of systematic contribution appropriation with full financial impact documentation. The subject line read, "Thank you for the clarification." As I hit send, I could hear champagne glasses clinking behind the glass doors. Within minutes, I knew their celebration would become something very different. I had barely reached the parking garage when my phone began vibrating continuously. The first call came from Miranda's personal line. I declined it. Then Preston's number flashed on my screen. Declined. Then Miranda again. Finally, I paused to read the text messages that were flooding in. "Miranda, we need to talk immediately. Don't do anything rash. Preston, there's been a misunderstanding. Come back upstairs now. Diana, whatever they're offering you will triple it. This can be resolved." The most revealing message came from Jake, the paralegal who'd been celebrating while I waited outside. "Holy shit, Riley, what did you send them? Preston looks like he's having a heart attack." That's when I knew they had read the expense fraud documentation. Preston's systematic theft of firm funds was now documented in the hands of someone who understood exactly how to present financial evidence in a way that would destroy his career and potentially result in criminal charges. I was unlocking my car when I heard hurried footsteps echoing through the parking garage. I turned to see Miranda rushing toward me, her usually perfect appearance disheveled from running in heels. "Riley, wait," she called breathlessly. "We need to discuss the situation rationally." I looked at her calmly. "What situation would that be, Miranda?" "The documents you sent," she said, trying to catch her breath. "There are serious accusations in there that need to be addressed through proper channels." "You mean the forensic analysis of expense fraud? I thought you'd appreciate the thoroughness. I use the same methodologies that have been so successful in our client cases." Her face went pale. "Those are internal firm matters, financial discrepancies that can be explained and resolved. But the other accusations about contribution attribution, those are more serious." "Are they accusations if they're documented facts?" I asked. "Every case is cited. Every innovation is timestamped. Every instance of credit reassignment is proven with email chains and presentation records." "Business attribution in law firms is complex," Miranda said quickly. "Support staff contribute within the framework of attorney supervision. That's standard practice. Is it standard practice to exclude the person who solved your biggest case from celebrating the victory?" I asked. "Or to feature attorneys on magazine covers for innovations they didn't create?" Miranda's expression shifted to something approaching desperation. "What do you want, Riley? A promotion? Partnership track? Name your terms." What I wanted was recognition for my work, inclusion in the successes I made possible, and basic professional respect. I replied, "But you've shown me something more valuable. That I was wasting my talents trying to succeed in a place designed to keep me invisible." As I drove away, my phone continued buzzing with increasingly frantic calls and messages. I finally pulled over to read what had become a flood of communications. The most interesting was a text from Marcus Thompson, my former colleague. "Whatever you did, it's working. 2 partners from Blackwood just called asking about exit interview discussions I might have had with former staff. They sound terrified." I realized the partners were beginning to understand the scope of what I had documented. This wasn't just about Preston's expense fraud or my specific contributions. It was evidence of a systematic pattern that could expose the firm to lawsuits from every support professional they'd exploited over the past several years. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, the voice belonged to Dr. Patricia Webb, the firm's external legal counsel. "Ms. Martinez," she said carefully, "I understand you've raised some concerns about firm practices that require immediate attention. Could we schedule a meeting to discuss resolution?" "I'm no longer a firm employee, Dr. Webb," I replied. "My concerns were addressed when I accepted a position elsewhere. The documentation you've compiled raises serious questions that go beyond your individual situation," she continued. "If these patterns exist as described, the firm needs to take corrective action before they result in larger problems." I smiled at her careful legal language. "I agree completely. The patterns are exactly as described, and they do require corrective action. That's why I documented them so thoroughly. We'd like to propose a consulting arrangement," she said. "You could help us identify and correct these issues while maintaining your role with your new employer." "That's an interesting offer," I said. "But I think the correction these issues require is beyond what any consulting arrangement could address." After ending the call, I drove to Harrison and Associates for my final meeting with Margaret Harrison. It was time to discuss exactly how my new position would be structured. Margaret Harrison's office occupied the corner of a gleaming downtown tower with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the financial district. As I entered, she gestured toward a conference table where 2 other people were waiting. "Riley, I'd like you to meet David, our managing partner, and Sarah Rodriguez, who heads our corporate investigations division. They've been following your work closely." David stood to shake my hand. "We've been wondering when you'd realize that your innovations were being systematically undervalued. The legal community talks about Blackwood's analytical breakthroughs, but everyone knows they're coming from their forensic staff, not their attorneys." Sarah nodded agreement. "The Kim protocol that's been getting so much attention? Every forensic accountant in the city knows that methodology didn't originate with Diana Kim. The timing, the complexity, the integration with existing systems, it has your analytical signature all over it." Margaret opened a folder on the table. "We're prepared to offer you something that Blackwood never would, full credit and ownership of your innovations, plus the resources to develop them properly." She outlined the position they were creating specifically for me, Director of Forensic Innovation, with my own team, budget, and most importantly, recognition for every methodology I developed. My name would be on patents, publications, and conference presentations. No more watching other people receive credit for my work. "The compensation package reflects the value you bring," David added, sliding a document across the table. "Base salary, performance bonuses, equity participation, and profit sharing from methodologies you develop." I reviewed the offer carefully. It was everything I had wanted at Blackwood, but had been told was impossible for non-attorneys. "There's one more element," Margaret said. "We've been tracking the revenue impact of your work at Blackwood. Our projections suggest that hiring you could generate $15 to $20 million in new business over the next 2 years, primarily from clients seeking the analytical capabilities they've seen in your previous cases." "Including clients from Blackwood?" I asked. Sarah smiled. "Especially clients from Blackwood. Corporate counsel aren't loyal to law firms. They're loyal to results. When they learn the person behind those results is available elsewhere, they follow the talent." The week following my departure from Blackwood, Vail and Associates was like watching a carefully constructed house of cards begin to tremble. Word of my move to Harrison and Associates spread like wildfire through the tight-knit legal community, fueled by whispers on professional networks, LinkedIn updates, and hushed conversations at industry mixers. My inbox and voicemail, once largely ignored by the senior partners at Blackwood, became a flurry of activity. Partners who had barely acknowledged my existence during my 3-year tenure suddenly found my number, leaving messages about transition support and knowledge transfer arrangements. Their tone was polite, almost deferential, but I could sense the undercurrent of panic. They weren't calling to wish me well. They were scrambling to contain the fallout from the email I'd sent, the one that laid bare 3 years of contribution theft and Preston Vale's expense fraud. Preston himself had become a ghost. Once a fixture at firm events, schmoozing clients and basking in the glow of his self-proclaimed brilliance, he was now conspicuously absent from client meetings, partner lunches, and even the firm's weekly case review sessions. My forensic documentation of his expense fraud, $340,000 in fraudulent reimbursements meticulously cross-referenced with calendar entries, client records, and receipts, had triggered an internal investigation. Sources within the firm, including a discreet text from a former colleague, confirmed that the partners were combing through Preston's expense reports with growing alarm. Each discovery tightened the noose around his career, and the firm's leadership was beginning to realize that their Golden Boy's reputation was built on shaky foundations. The most telling moment came on the third day after my departure, when my phone lit up with a call from Diana Kim. Her name on the screen sent a jolt through me, not because I was surprised, but because I had anticipated this exact move. Diana, the lateral partner who had rebranded my cryptocurrency tracing methodology as the Kim Protocol, was nothing if not strategic. Her voice, when I answered, was syrupy, laced with a warmth that felt as artificial as the smile she wore at firm events. "Riley," she began, her tone carefully calibrated, "I hope you're settling in well at Harrison. I just wanted to reach out because I'd hate for there to be any misunderstanding about the cryptocurrency work we did together. It was truly collaborative, wasn't it?" I leaned back in my chair, picturing her in her corner office, surrounded by the accolades she'd collected for my work. "Collaborative is an interesting word choice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Could you remind me what your specific contributions were to the methodology development?" The pause that followed was pregnant with unease. I could almost hear her searching for a defensible answer. "Well," she said finally, "the overall strategic framework, the legal applications, the client presentation elements, those were critical pieces I brought to the table." "I see," I replied, letting the words hang for a moment. "And you developed these contributions when exactly?" Another pause, longer this time. "The collaboration happened over time," she hedged. "It's difficult to pinpoint specific moments." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Actually, it's quite easy to pinpoint specific moments when you have comprehensive documentation," I said. "Every email, every file timestamp, every methodology iteration is recorded. Would you like me to share that documentation with the legal publications that featured your work? American Lawyer might be interested in the full context behind the Kim Protocol." Her response came quickly, her voice tighter now. "That won't be necessary, Riley. I think there's been enough disruption already." As I ended the call, a realization settled over me like a wave. The power dynamic had shifted completely. For 3 years, I had been the one chasing recognition, carefully presenting my work through proper channels, hoping for a nod of acknowledgement from people like Diana and Preston. Now, they were the ones on the defensive, seeking protection from someone who held irrefutable evidence of their professional fraud. My documentation, email chains, timestamped analysis files, presentation drafts, was a sword I hadn't even needed to unsheath fully. The mere threat of its exposure was enough to make them squirm. But setting the trap wasn't just about exposing individuals like Diana and Preston. It was about dismantling the system that had enabled their behavior. Over the next week, I continued to refine my strategy, leveraging my new position at Harrison and Associates to amplify the impact of my departure. Margaret Harrison, the firm's founder, had given me a platform to showcase my expertise, and I was determined to make the most of it. I began reaching out to key contacts, former clients, industry peers, and even reporters who covered the legal beat, discreetly sharing the narrative of my contributions and the circumstances of my exit. I didn't need to exaggerate. The truth, backed by my documentation, was damning enough. The first tangible result came 2 weeks after my departure, when Meridian Corporation, the client whose embezzlement case had cemented Preston's reputation, announced they were retaining Harrison and Associates for a new investigation. Their general counsel, a no-nonsense attorney named Laura Bennett, was blunt during our initial meeting. "We were impressed with the analytical work on our previous case," she said, her eyes meeting mine across the conference table. "When we learned that the person behind that analysis was now available independently, the decision was straightforward. We want you, Riley, and the methodologies you bring." Her words were a validation I hadn't realized I had been craving. For years, I had watched clients praise the firm for my work, unaware that I was the one who had untangled their financial messes. Now, they were seeking me out by name. Over the next month, 4 more clients followed suit, each citing the same reason: they wanted access to the forensic capabilities they had experienced in my previous cases. These weren't small players. 2 were Fortune 500 companies, 1 was a major hedge fund, and another was a tech startup with a valuation in the billions. Their defection sent shockwaves through Blackwood, Vail and Associates, and the legal press began to take notice. Blackwood's response was as predictable as it was desperate. They slashed fees for existing clients, offering discounts that bordered on unsustainable. They issued press releases touting new, innovative strategies to replace the methodologies I had taken with me. But the legal industry isn't easily fooled. Clients don't stay loyal to discounted services when the core value, the analytical edge, has walked out the door. Blackwood's reputation, once propped up by my uncredited work, was beginning to crumble under the weight of its own practices. Meanwhile, my new role at Harrison and Associates was a revelation. For the first time in my career, I had the resources to match my ambition. A dedicated team, a substantial budget, and most importantly, recognition for every innovation I developed. I was no longer confined to the shadows of a partner's presentation deck. I was developing new forensic methodologies, building on the cryptocurrency tracing system that had been misattributed to Diana, and training a team of forensic professionals to implement them. I created scalable systems that could handle multiple cases simultaneously, streamlining processes that had once taken weeks into days. My productivity soared, not because I was working harder, but because I was finally in an environment that valued my contributions. The contrast was stark. At Blackwood, I had spent years watching others present my work, my name scrubbed from the breakthroughs that drove the firm's success. At Harrison, my name was on every methodology, every patent application, every conference presentation. The difference wasn't just professional, it was transformational. I was building a reputation based on my actual innovations, not someone else's narrative. Clients were requesting me by name, and industry peers were reaching out to collaborate on new projects. The trap I had set wasn't just about exposing Blackwood's flaws. It was about proving what was possible when talent was given the space to thrive. The trap's final piece fell into place during a follow-up call from a legal reporter who had been tracking the client defections. "Riley," she said, "there's a rumor that Blackwood is facing an internal audit over expense irregularities and contribution disputes. Care to comment?" I chose my words carefully. "I'm focused on my work at Harrison and Associates," I said, "but I believe transparency and proper attribution are critical for any firm's long-term success. Clients and professionals deserve to know who's driving the results they rely on." That statement, published in a widely read legal blog, was the final push. Blackwood's internal investigation expanded, and whispers of potential bar association scrutiny began to circulate. The trap I had set wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. By documenting the truth and strategically sharing it, I had shifted the narrative, not just for myself, but for every professional who had been undervalued in a system designed to keep them invisible. 6 weeks after the victory celebration that had changed everything, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from a number I hadn't expected to see again. Miranda Blackwood, the managing partner at Blackwood, Vail and Associates. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen, weighing whether to let it go to voicemail. Curiosity won out. I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Riley," Miranda began, her voice carrying the polished cadence of someone used to commanding attention, "I hope you've had time to reflect on the situation. The partners have been in extensive discussions about how to address the concerns you raised." I leaned back in my chair, glancing out the window of my new office at Harrison and Associates, with a city skyline stretched before me. "I'm listening," I replied, my voice steady but guarded. "We'd like to offer you a partnership position," she said, her words deliberate, as if she'd rehearsed them. "Equity participation, full profit sharing, and recognition as the head of our forensic accounting division. Your name would be on every methodology you develop, every innovation you bring to the firm. This is a significant opportunity, Riley, and we believe it reflects the value you've always brought to our team." I let the words hang in the air, the irony settling over me like a heavy fog. For 3 years, I had poured my heart into Blackwood, Vale, and Associates, chasing the kind of recognition Miranda was now dangling before me. Every late night, every breakthrough analysis, every uncredited victory had been fueled by the hope that my work would earn me a seat at their table. Now here it was, the offer I'd once dreamed of, presented with the urgency of a firm scrambling to repair its self-inflicted wounds. But instead of elation, I felt a profound sense of hollowness. "That's a significant change from numbers people don't really celebrate the same way we do," I said, my voice sharp but controlled, recalling Preston Vale's dismissive words at the victory celebration that had excluded me. Those words had been the final straw, the moment that crystallized years of being sidelined despite my contributions. Miranda's response came quickly, her tone conciliatory but tinged with defensiveness. "Those comments were inappropriate and don't reflect the firm's actual values. We've had time to reflect, and we realize now how valuable your contributions have been. We want to ensure you receive proper recognition going forward, Riley. This partnership offer is our commitment to that." I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, though she couldn't see it. "It's interesting," I observed, "that this realization coincided with my documentation of systematic contribution theft and expense fraud." My words were pointed, a reminder of the email I'd sent 6 weeks earlier, which had included irrefutable evidence of Preston's $340,000 in fraudulent expense reimbursements and a detailed account of how my innovations had been consistently misattributed to attorneys. There was a pause, the kind that betrayed discomfort. "The Preston situation is being handled separately," Miranda said, her voice tightening. "That's a personnel matter, and it doesn't affect the partnership offer we're making to you." "What happened with Preston, exactly?" I pressed, unwilling to let her sidestep the issue. Preston Vale, the senior partner who had built his reputation on my forensic breakthroughs, had been a key figure in the firm's culture of appropriation. His dismissal, or whatever had happened, wasn't just a footnote, it was a direct consequence of the evidence I'd uncovered. Another long pause. When Miranda spoke again, her words were measured, as if she were navigating a legal minefield. "He's no longer with the firm. The expense irregularities you identified required immediate action. We're addressing it internally, but I prefer to focus on the opportunity we're offering you." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my desk, the weight of her words sinking in. Preston's termination was a victory, but it felt empty. His removal was like treating a symptom while ignoring the disease. A firm culture that had thrived on exploiting support staff like me, absorbing our innovations while keeping us invisible. The partnership offer, as tempting as it might have seemed years ago, was merely another bandage on a broken system. "I appreciate the offer, Miranda," I said finally, my voice calm but resolute. "But I've found something better than partnership in a firm that had to be forced to value me. I found a place where my contributions are recognized from the beginning." I thought of Harrison and Associates, where I was already building a forensic division with full credit for my work, a team that valued my expertise, and a platform to shape industry standards. The contrast was stark, and it made Miranda's offer feel like a belated apology from a system that hadn't changed. Miranda's tone shifted, a hint of urgency creeping in. "Riley, we're prepared to make this work. Name your terms, additional resources, a larger team, even a seat on the executive committee. We know your methodologies are driving our competitive edge, and we want you back to lead that effort." I shook my head, though she couldn't see it. "It's not about terms, Miranda. It's about trust. For 3 years, I watched my work be presented as someone else's. I was excluded from celebrations, client meetings, and recognition, all while generating millions in value for the firm. You're offering me partnership now because my documentation exposed a truth you couldn't ignore. But what happens when the next forensic accountant comes along? Will they face the same invisibility until they force your hand?" There was silence on the other end, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. Miranda was a skilled negotiator, but she couldn't argue with the reality I'd laid bare. "We're implementing changes," she said finally, her voice softer. "New policies to ensure proper attribution, better recognition for support staff. Your departure has been a wake-up call for us." "That's good to hear," I replied, and I meant it. Change, even if forced, was progress, but it wasn't enough to pull me back. "I wish you luck with those changes, but my path is here now. I'm building something where recognition isn't an afterthought, it's the foundation." As I ended the call, I felt a mix of closure and clarity. The partnership offer, once the pinnacle of my ambitions, was now a relic of a past I'd outgrown. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had found a place where my worth was seen from the start, and that was worth more than any title or profit-sharing agreement. What I hadn't anticipated was how my actions would ripple beyond Blackwood, Vale and Associates. The email I'd sent, with its meticulously documented evidence of contribution theft and expense fraud, had done more than secure my exit. It had ignited a reckoning. The State Bar Association launched a formal investigation into systematic exploitation of support professionals, using my documentation as a framework to examine industry-wide patterns. My case wasn't just about one firm. It was a lens into a pervasive issue in the legal world, where technical expertise was often undervalued and misattributed. Legal publications began dissecting the issue of contribution attribution, publishing articles about the ethical obligations of attorneys to credit non-lawyer innovations. My story became a case study in professional recognition and workplace equity, featured in journals like American Lawyer and discussed at legal conferences. I was no longer just Riley Martinez, the forensic accountant who'd been excluded from a victory celebration. I was a catalyst for change, a name associated with challenging the status quo. More importantly, other forensic professionals began coming forward, emboldened by my example. Across the country, support staff shared stories of their innovations being claimed by attorneys, their expertise sidelined, their contributions erased. The legal industry was being forced to confront a truth it had long ignored. Its competitive advantages often stemmed from the technical expertise of non-lawyers, not just the legal acumen of attorneys. Marcus Thompson, my former colleague who'd left Blackwood after similar frustrations, called to update me on the growing fallout. "Your documentation opened floodgates," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. 12 former employees have now filed complaints with the Bar Association, citing patterns of contribution theft. Blackwood is facing sanctions, financial penalties, and reputation damage that could take years to repair. They're scrambling to contain this. Elena Rodriguez, another former colleague who'd seen her contract analysis strategies appropriated, shared similar news. 3 major firms are implementing attribution policies specifically because of the attention your case generated, she told me. "You've changed industry practices, Riley. Firms are starting to realize they can't keep exploiting support staff without consequences. The transformation I'd hoped for in my own career was unfolding across the profession. Support professionals were demanding recognition, and law firms were being forced to acknowledge that their success relied on technical innovations as much as legal expertise. My documentation had provided a blueprint for accountability, and others were using it to advocate for themselves. But the real victory wasn't just the industry-wide shift, it was the personal empowerment I'd gained. By refusing to accept Miranda's offer, I'd chosen a path where my worth was inherent, not contingent on forcing others to see it. At Harrison & Associates, I was building a forensic division that prioritized transparency, recognition, and collaboration. My team was growing, my methodologies were setting new standards, and my name was on every innovation I developed. The contrast with Blackwood's belated offer was stark. One was a reaction to exposure, the other a foundation for genuine progress. As I hung up with Marcus and Elena, I realized the true scope of what I'd achieved. The partnership offer from Blackwood had been a test, not of their sincerity, but of my own resolve. By walking away, I'd proven to myself that I didn't need their validation to thrive. I'd built something better, and in doing so, I'd helped others find the courage to demand the same. 6 months after being excluded from Blackwood, Vail & Associates' victory celebration, I received an invitation that marked the culmination of my transformation from an invisible contributor to an industry leader. The National Association of Forensic Accountants, NAFA, had invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference, a prestigious platform attended by hundreds of forensic professionals, legal experts, and industry influencers. The topic, Innovation Recognition and Professional Development in Legal Settings, felt like a direct reflection of my journey, a chance to not only share my story but to reshape the narrative for countless others in my field. As I prepared my presentation, I found myself reflecting deeply on the path that had led me here. Standing outside that executive conference room, watching my colleagues celebrate a victory I had made possible had been a moment of profound clarity. The sting of exclusion, the celebration is for core team members only, had not just wounded my pride. It had revealed a systemic truth about the firm's values and the broader legal industry's treatment of support professionals. That moment had been the catalyst for everything that followed: my meticulous documentation, my strategic exit, and my decision to build a career where my worth was recognized from the outset. Now, standing on the cusp of addressing the NAFA, I realized I was no longer just a forensic accountant who uncovered financial truths. I was a voice for change, with a platform to influence practices across an entire industry. The conference hall was a sea of faces: seasoned professionals, eager young analysts, and representatives from law firms and regulatory bodies. As I stepped onto the stage, the weight of the moment settled over me. I began my speech with the words that had once cut so deeply: "The celebration is for core team members only." A murmur rippled through the audience, a mix of recognition and curiosity. I paused, letting the words hang in the air, before continuing. Those words changed my career. Not because they hurt, though they did, but because they showed me the truth. I was seeking recognition from people who were structurally incapable of providing it. I shared my story, not as a tale of revenge, but as a testament to professional transformation. I described the years of working late nights to uncover financial fraud, only to watch my breakthroughs credited to others. I spoke of the cryptocurrency tracing methodology I had developed, which had revolutionized a high-profile case, only to see it rebranded as the Kim Protocol under a partner's name. I detailed the moment of exclusion that had pushed me to act, not out of anger, but out of a refusal to accept systematic undervaluation. My voice grew steadier as I explained how I had documented 3 years of contributions, exposed expense fraud, and leveraged my expertise to secure a role at Harrison & Associates, where my innovations were celebrated rather than appropriated. The most powerful victory, I concluded, is not convincing others of your worth. It's building something where your worth is recognized from the beginning. The auditorium erupted into a standing ovation, the sound washing over me like validation I had never received at Blackwood. But the applause wasn't the true measure of the moment. It was the conversations that followed, professionals approaching me with stories that echoed my own, their voices filled with frustration but also newfound resolve. A senior forensic accountant from Chicago shared how her firm had dismissed her asset recovery strategies as support work. A junior analyst from Seattle confessed to staying silent while his supervisor claimed credit for his data models. Each story reinforced the urgency of my message. Change begins with refusing to accept invisibility. The most poignant moment came during the reception afterward. A young forensic accountant, barely out of graduate school, approached me with tears in her eyes. "I've been dealing with the same situation at my firm," she said, her voice trembling. "Watching attorneys present my analysis as their insights, being excluded from client meetings where my work is discussed. Your speech gave me the courage to start documenting everything." I listened as she described her fear of speaking out, her worry that rocking the boat would jeopardize her career. I offered her practical advice: timestamp your work, save email chains, track your contributions' financial impact. But more than that, I shared the lesson that had transformed my own path. Your value doesn't depend on their validation. That conversation crystallized the real victory. It wasn't just about my own rise from obscurity to leadership. It was about empowering others to demand the recognition they deserved and to challenge systems that thrived on their silence. The ripple effects of that keynote were immediate and far-reaching. I received multiple job offers from top-tier firms, each recognizing the value of my forensic expertise and the methodologies I had developed. Consulting requests poured in from organizations seeking to implement attribution policies that ensured fair credit for technical professionals. Law schools invited me to speak on professional development, eager to prepare their students for navigating hierarchical workplaces. Industry publications reached out, asking to feature my story as a case study in workplace equity. The attention was humbling, but it was the broader impact on the forensic accounting community that felt most significant. My speech had sparked a movement, encouraging professionals to document their contributions and advocate for themselves in ways I hadn't dared to early in my career. 1 year after that fateful victory celebration, Harrison and Associates announced its most successful year in history. The forensic division I led had generated $23 million in new business, driven by innovative methodologies that were being adopted industry-wide. We had attracted top talent from competing firms, professionals drawn not just by competitive salaries, but by a culture that prioritized recognition and advancement. My name appeared prominently in the firm's annual report, on patent applications for new analytical tools, and in legal publications that praised our division's impact. But what mattered most was the structure I had built within the division. Every team member's contributions were documented and credited appropriately, from junior analysts to senior investigators. We held regular innovation showcases where staff presented their work directly to clients, ensuring their names were tied to their breakthroughs. Mentorship programs paired experienced professionals with new hires, fostering a culture of collaboration and growth rather than competition and appropriation. The contrast with my time at Blackwood, Vail and Associates was stark. There, I had watched others present my work while I remained in the shadows. At Harrison, I was mentoring others to build their own reputations, guiding them to navigate the industry with confidence and clarity. The difference wasn't just professional, it was personal. I woke up each day energized, knowing my work was valued and my team was empowered. The division became a beacon for forensic professionals seeking environments where their expertise was celebrated, not exploited. Meanwhile, Blackwood, Vail and Associates struggled to recover from the fallout of my departure. Their revenues had plummeted by 31%, a direct result of client defections and a talent exodus. 3 partners had left to join competitors, unwilling to weather the firm's tarnished reputation. The State Bar Association's ongoing scrutiny, triggered by my documentation of contribution theft and expense fraud, had cast a long shadow over their operations. The firm's attempts to stabilize, offering fee reductions and scrambling to retain clients, couldn't replace the analytical innovations that had once been their competitive edge. 6 months after their troubles began, Miranda Blackwood called one final time. Her tone was measured, almost conciliatory. "Riley," she said, "I want you to know that we've implemented comprehensive attribution policies. Every contribution from support staff is now documented and credited appropriately. We've learned from our mistakes." I could hear the strain in her voice, the weight of a firm fighting to survive. "Would you consider consulting with us on implementation? Your expertise in systematic analysis could help us build better recognition systems." The irony was almost poetic. The firm that had excluded me now sought my expertise to fix the very systems that had driven me away. "That's encouraging," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Change is always possible when the consequences of not changing become clear. I paused, letting her words linger. "But I think there are plenty of qualified consultants available for that work. My focus is on building something new rather than repairing something broken." Declining her offer wasn't about spite, it was about clarity. My energy was better spent creating a model for recognition and innovation at Harrison than patching up a culture that had failed me and countless others. The broader impact of my actions continued to unfold. The NAFA conference had ignited a reckoning within the legal industry. The State Bar Association's investigation into contribution theft expanded, with 12 former Blackwood employees filing complaints that mirrored my own. Legal publications began running features on contribution attribution, exploring the ethical obligations of firms to credit non-lawyer innovations. Major firms, feeling the pressure, implemented new policies to ensure support staff received recognition. Law schools incorporated case studies on workplace equity into their curricula, using my story as a framework. The transformation I had hoped to see in my own career was now reshaping the profession, giving voice to technical professionals who had long been sidelined. The most fulfilling outcome, however, was personal. By refusing to accept undervaluation, I had not only transformed my own career but had inspired others to do the same. The young forensic accountant from the reception reached out months later, sharing that her documentation had led to a promotion and formal recognition at her firm. Others sent messages describing how they had negotiated better roles or left toxic workplaces, armed with the courage to demand what they deserved. Each story was a reminder that the real victory wasn't just about my own success. It was about dismantling systems that silenced talent and building ones that amplified it. As I stood at the NAFA conference, addressing a room full of professionals who saw themselves in my story, I realized the true scope of my journey. The victory celebration I had been excluded from had lasted one evening. The transformation it sparked, empowering myself and others to demand recognition, would last a lifetime. Today, 2 years after that victory celebration, my transformation is complete. I'm not just successful, I'm building systems that prevent other talented professionals from experiencing the systematic undervaluation I endured. The forensic division at Harrison and Associates has become the industry standard for professional recognition and innovation development. We've established mentorship programs, attribution protocols, and advancement pathways that ensure technical expertise receives appropriate recognition. More broadly, my documentation of systematic contribution theft has influenced legal industry practices nationwide. Law schools now teach courses on support staff recognition, bar associations have established attribution guidelines, and major firms have implemented policies specifically designed to prevent the exploitation I experienced. But the most satisfying outcome isn't professional success or industry recognition. It's the knowledge that talented people no longer have to choose between being invisible contributors or leaving their careers behind. The email I sent from outside that victory celebration didn't just change my life. It helped change the professional landscape for everyone who had been systematically undervalued. Sometimes exclusion from someone else's celebration is exactly the catalyst you need to build your own. If you've ever had your contributions overlooked, your innovations claimed by others, or your expertise undervalued, because of your position rather than your performance. Remember this. Your worth isn't determined by their recognition. The most powerful response to systematic undervaluation isn't anger or resentment. It's documentation, preparation, and the courage to build something better where your contributions receive the recognition they deserve. That victory celebration I was excluded from lasted one evening. The career transformation that resulted from that exclusion has lasted years and continues growing. The table they wouldn't let me sit at wasn't worth fighting for. Building my own table, where everyone's contributions are valued, was worth everything. What's your experience with workplace recognition? Have you ever had your contributions overlooked or claimed by others? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most powerful career transformations begin with the courage to document what's really happening and refuse to accept systematic undervaluation.